our speaker. All right. So I have the distinct pleasure to introduce you to Sigmund and Holly. Sigmund Fidyke and Holly Johnston are going to talk to us today about quiet quitting. We've heard about quiet quitting. There's a lot of misunderstandings of quiet quitting, and they're going to help to explain that and give their interpretation as well. And then why it's important to us, because I do think that it is relevant to all of us. It's something that we need to know, and something that, just being aware of and gaining a better understanding. So Holly is, I like to say she has a formula for helping companies achieve success. And that formula is strategy plus culture plus talent. And that's the way to get growth. And so she's working with companies to really help them grow using that formula. And Sigmund is a technologist. And Sigmund, you happen to be on the board of my alma mater,
there you go,
computer science group at Chapman University. And so I'm excited that you're still doing that and love it. Gotta go Chapman. And I'd also call Sigmund a bit of a philosopher. So it's interesting. Sigmund is just a joy to talk to. There isn't a negative bone in his body. This man has got the formula for happiness in life. So Sigmund and Holly, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Holly and I are going to talk about quiet quitting today. I have a slide deck. It's got more slides than we want to show because we wanted to share it. There's a lot in there and you can read it later. But I think one of the keys, and if I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now so you can see that, as long as I pick the right screen. There we go. I think we're good. So I want to talk about quiet quitting. It's a real thing. It's a manageable thing. And there it is. Sorry, I had to find the right thing that gets me next week. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, what it isn't, whether it's new or not. And spoiler alert, it's not. And then Holly's going to spend some time talking to you about how to lead through this, how it's an advantage for your business, and how to make it really work for you. It's something that's coming. It's just I use the word tide a lot. The tide comes in, you complain about it, but somehow it just comes in anyway. But I'm going to start with a question. It's a rhetorical question. Don't have to answer it right now, but why do you work? And it's something that boomers like me and my parents, the silence, your work is your identity. It's what you do. It's who you are. But my answer was I work to solve problems, to create new solutions, to invent new things. That's what gets me going. If a company wanted to pay me a whole bunch of money to do boring work, I'd find something else to do. So that, that's why I work, but it's different for each person. And it's part of what leads into the quiet quitting. I want to talk first about what quiet quitting is not. A lot of people call it as just doing the minimum to keep your job, slacking off, taking advantage of the company. There's a key point here. It's not that, at least not the quiet quitting that we're going to talk about. But to a boomer manager, it feels like that. And that's why this definition has stayed around for so long, is that it feels like it. But what it really is, the best definition I like is the real definition of quiet quitting is working. Or acting your wage is also one of my favorites, and doing your job. But it's about that. It's about firm boundaries between personal work and life, and unwilling to work beyond that without getting more thanks, praise, pay, etc. that would go with it. The best definition I have, though, is the last one on this page, which says finding happiness without climbing the corporate ladder. And that, as a boomer, I'm not sure how those words go together to make a sentence. That makes no sense to me. People say those words. I hear the words and I know it's English, but I don't know what you're saying. But the idea, and this is my example. My son is 32. He has been a programmer at Massimo Med Devices for 12 years. And if you ask people who I am, most of my friends will say he's a technologist, he's an IT guy, you'll come up with all those, he's a CTO, maybe even a Zoom master. What you won't hear, except from just a couple of people, is that he's been a scoutmaster for 22 years, that he's a cabinet maker, etc. You won't hear those as much because what I project is, as a boomer, is my job. If you were to ask people who my son is, his friends, he would say, the guy is a gamer. I think he's in IT, but I know he's a gamer. And that's his definition. That's what he gets joy. If a new version of one of his games comes out, don't call him that weekend. Because he won't answer the phone. That is who he is. That's what he enjoys. But it's not the Salesforce guy, the guy in charge of all of Salesforce for Massimo Med Devices. It's not the systems analyst. It's not. You won't hear those. But that's what he does. And there's a lot of this is coming from TikTok. Just to let you know how it's not a boomer thing. And there's a TikTok post that really set it off and said, I work just as hard. I get just as much done. I just don't stress and internally rip myself to shreds. And it's beautiful. So that is what quiet quitting is. Paul Allen said it's saying no to responsibilities outside of the traditional job description. It's saying no and not replying to emails over the weekend. It's leaving work on time. And I like this thing at the bottom. I'm going to read it off. Quiet quitting signals a disconnect between the employer and the employee regarding expectations. The root of the issue is not that the employee refuses to do more work than is necessary. It's rather that they don't trust their employer to moderate their workload or adequately reward them for their efforts. That's what quiet quitting is. Quiet quitting, I believe that millennials and Zoomers are going to be so much better at retiring than boomers and silence were ever, because a boomer gets to the end of his job, of his career, and goes, I have no idea what I'm going to do next. A Zoomer is just going to just continue doing what they're doing without that 8-hour thing where they were working for a living. Another great quote I have, got to find it. My dad said to me, this is another TikTok, stop being happy with your steady job that pays you enough so you can afford whatever you want and leaves you tons of free time. Life and work need to be a grind and a fight, or you're not doing it right. So there's a boomer or a silent talking to a millennial. So that's sort of what we're talking about. Most of it's TikTok, so I'm not going to show you videos, but I think the one that, if you can see here, I'm going to read it off. I actually don't want to climb corporate ladders. I don't care about job titles. I don't need accolades. I want an income to fund my lifestyle, not to be depressed, help other people, be around good humans. That's it. Again, that's quiet quitting. Let's be clear, and Holly's going to go into this more. I'm not saying everybody's like this, but the place where we're at is that it's not 5% of the people that are like this. It's not 10% of the people that are like this. You cannot create a workforce that doesn't include a measurable percentage of people for whom work is not their life. And you need to deal with that. That's the tide that's coming in. You need to be able to manage that. These people are not unwilling to work. They're just unwilling for their definition of who they are to be their work. It has some real positives. There's a number of studies have come out showing that the burnout rate is really a lot lower for people like this. So they're not defining themselves as their job. They actually have higher productivity. And of course, they'll stick with the job if they feel supported and they feel that they can do what they, that they can take their time off and be their own self outside of work. You get better decision-making, you get a better ability to think outside the box. But one of the keys here is that these people maintain their own well-being without your help, because they're not dependent on the company for everything. So there's, if you talk about, quiet quitter, I got to somehow manage to make things work and still have them in there. I'm going to turn that around and say, the more of these people you have, the better off you're going to be. If you lead them well, again, Holly will go into this, they will follow you. They will continue. They will, they'll be there on that 1 week or those days or that one weekend where you really had to step up and do more. The last thing I want to touch on here quickly is this is the continuation of a trend. In the 1800s, it was 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. That was considered normal. In the 1900s, and a lot of it was pushed actually by Henry Ford, it was the 8-hour workday, 5 days a week. He wanted you to have, free time to go drive to go drive a car. And then the interesting part, the whole work-life balance that we've heard of, that was created by women. Because when the women entered the workforce in the 1970s, they remembered they had another job to do at home. Men were pretty good at ignoring that job at home, but women did not. And so that's where they got to the work-life balance. Then work-life integration happened in the 2000s when we had some, the connectivity made it that way. But quiet quitting is just the next step that says that this is not my life, that I have a life that includes work. And if you said, I'm just going to repeat myself, and I want to give Holly her time. So there we go. So take it away, Holly. I don't know if we'll take questions at the end. So we'll do that then. So Holly, here we go.
Thank you, Sigmund. Great to continue this conversation. And as Sigmund kind of teed this up, there's lots of different opinions about quiet quitting, what it is, what it isn't. And this is how he and I have decided to talk about it after really looking at a lot of the research and the TikToks and the debate and discussion and dialogue over this. So you may not agree with some of our points, but we hope to leave you with something practical today as we finish our conversation and open it up for questions. So what does this all mean for leaders? Gallup organization did a study in 2019, just before the pandemic, and they found that only 18% of the respondents to the survey were fully engaged at work, and only 17% felt highly resilient at work, an attribute that's really important, and only 14% trusted their senior leaders and team leaders. So these are some of the concepts we want to talk about. Also, the Centers for Disease Control reported in 2018 that 71% of adults had at least one symptom of workplace stress: headaches, feeling overwhelmed, anxiety. And in 2021, an historic high, a quarter of the US workers quit their jobs. So just something to tee up our thinking here. So what does this mean for leaders? I'm going to go back to the definition Sigmund started with. I still work just as hard and get just as much done. I just don't stress and internally rip myself to shreds, and it's beautiful. So I'm not sure what all those words mean either, but I do believe that our workplace has changed, and it isn't going to go back. We as boomers are no longer leading boomers. We're leading Gen Zs, millennials, and Zoomers. So as Sigmund and I thought about this, I wanted to kind of challenge our thinking a little bit around these 4 points for us to think about. So on the next slide, let's look at the first one. Foster a new leader mindset. So I'm a boomer, like Sigmund said, my identity was my career. I clawed my way up the corporate ladder, working crazy hours, doing all the things that you've all done, at the expense of my family and my friends. So I need a different mindset about this conversation myself. But I think that today's organizations need help with their leaders in thinking about this differently and fostering this different mindset about work and their talent. So what do you think about these ideas? And we'll have some time at the end to talk about it. I personally believe that talent, your employees, are the greatest assets that you have in your company that deliver on your profits and deliver for your stakeholders. I believe that talent is the engine that drives an organization. So when your team has affinity for their work, they love it, they will deliver amazing results for you. And that cultivates resilience within the organization. And as we just looked at, resilience is an important attribute for work and for life today. So can we adopt a mindset that stepping up is optional? Now, what does that mean? So maybe it's not a bad thing that employees don't have the career ambitions that we had, don't want to volunteer for all of those committees and take on that additional responsibility. Should we look at that as optional rather than frowning on them not being fully engaged and doing the max? And I think, as we know, flexibility around this topic is really key. So on the next slide, understand what your people value. Now, we've all talked about this. This isn't a new concept, but everybody is unique. And as we're learning from the quiet quitters, what they value is more about their identity, what they love to do, their interests, their skills. Like Sigmund said, his identity is around being a gamer. When you think about your talent and your teams, people doing the same job, they do it differently. The Gallup organization talks about building on their strengths, focusing on their strengths. The Q12, if you're familiar with Gallup's Q12, and we've included that in the deck around engagement. But here on the slide are some of the statements about Q12. And these are statements that help people be engaged, that they value from their workplace. Do I have a chance to use my strengths every day? My leader cares about my opinions. So research by neurobiologists suggests that when love chemicals are released, you widen your perspective on yourself, you liberate your mind, you accept new thoughts and feelings. When you're doing work that you love, the love chemicals, you remember details more vividly, according to neurobiologists. You perform your tasks faster and better. You're more optimistic, glass half full, more loyal, more forgiving, more open to new information and experiences. Aren't those all qualities that we want in our talent, in our workers? So Marcus Buckingham talks about this love plus work concept in his current research and the impact that neurobiologists are talking about on this love chemical. And this is from his new book, Love Plus Work. So on the next slide, number 3, what does this mean for leaders? Culture for me is a huge thing. And I think as we look at what do our people value, how do we adjust our mindsets? The next question I thought about, well, are we all aligned? Is our culture aligned? And I think it's a conversation that we have with our leaders and our managers. Our managers in our organizations impact teams and engagement and productivity by 70%. So invest in your managers. So have a conversation. Let your leaders and managers talk to their teams about the culture and alignment. And maybe even the teams need to revamp their value statements or the company's value statements to reflect this changing mindset and this love plus work attitude of our quiet quitters. In some of the things I was reading, they talked about setting guidelines and boundaries, and I kind of liked this and thought I would share it. They talked about the quiet quitters embracing and appreciating when you set boundaries, such as you don't have to answer your phone or your Slack or your text or whatever after hours. It's optional. It's not frowned upon if you're not answering a call at 10 o'clock at night. Some of the companies were actually introducing on-call systems where necessary, where they did need to have after-hour support. So they purposely created a way to take care of that. One company developed a way to mark messages as urgent and define the guidelines around what constituted urgent and how that could be responded to after hours. So there are ways.
Holly, I'd like to add something to that.
Of course.
I was with a company that made a specific triage. If you could get it, if you're okay with an answer within a week, then you sent an email. If you were, if it needed to happen today, you sent a text. And if you need an answer now, you called. I mean, they set up a whole a triage kind of thing. And woe to you if you didn't follow it.
Right. But they defined it. So there was no frowning on others that, that weren't living up to an expectation that wasn't defined. Another company was giving employees just random paid personal days, that was part of their operating procedures for promoting well-being, which we're hearing a lot about. So there's some ideas around culture. And as we know, Drucker talks about culture being so important, right? That without a great culture, you can't execute on your strategy and achieve the profits and gains and team engagement that you need. Fourth, on the next slide, build trust. Trust, in my opinion, is so huge. A study in 2016 by Price Waterhouse revealed that 50% of CEOs worldwide considered lack of trust to be a major threat to their organizational growth. So we think that this whole conversation around quiet quitting really engenders the need for trust between our teams and our leaders. So trust, what do we mean by that? One definition is a firm belief in the honesty, integrity, reliability, truth, and character of someone or something. They can rely upon, right? They have confidence in someone or something. Another study with Buckingham and ADP Research Institute found that those who trusted teammates, team leaders, and senior leaders were 12 times as likely to be fully engaged and 42 times likely to be highly resilient. So I think trust is an important element of working with quiet quitters. And here's some ideas on how to build trust. So what steps can leaders take now? What steps can you practically put in place on Monday when we get started? So on the next slide, I think there's 4 things. And again, based on some of the research that we were looking at, these were ideas that came to us. And they're not new ideas, but I think there's a different take on some of these ideas. The first one being to organize around teams. Well, don't we all do that? I mean, that's not a new idea. But here's the difference on that. They talked about, our HRIS systems, Workday, or whatever it is that you use. So many of them just are vertical. They show who you report to, but they don't show what teams you work on. So the idea here is it's not teamwork, but organizing work around teams, building on strengths, diversity of thought, and then setting goals around those teams rather than the company cascading and having individual goals. I kind of like that little nuance. Weekly check-ins. Well, we all do weekly check-ins with our team. That's not a new idea. But the research shows that organizations that build trust view a once-a-week check-in between employees and team leaders as the core human ritual at work that drives engagement. And the conversation, according to Buckingham, around love plus work is ask these 4 questions for an entire year and you will drive trust and engagement. And those questions are, in your one-on-one check-in, you're not reporting on your projects. You as a leader are having this conversation. What did you love about last week? What did you loathe about last week? What are your priorities for the coming week? And what can I best do to help? A different conversation around one-on-ones. Invest in your talent, invest in your people, invest in your managers who impact so many of your teams. Again, not a new idea, but what I liked here was some examples of, again, using the Q12 from Gallup to drive engagement. But other examples were things like both investing personally, not just career oriented. So Amazon is paying college tuition as an example. Starbucks and UPS, they're paying for student loan reimbursement. So there's other ways to be creative to invest in your people. I'm going to save recognition for last. Let's take a quick look at why engagement is so important. And this comes from the Gallup organization. You can see that very quickly. It'll be in your slides. But recognition, the very last of the 4 ideas, a lot of research on recognition right now and how much more important recognition is in our workplace today, but especially with our Zoomers that we're talking about, our quiet quitters. They want recognition, praise, acknowledgement, gratitude, the pat on the back, the public thank you, the private thank you, the quick email. Recognition can be around just honoring, something more personal, honoring a work achievement. Maybe it's an anniversary or the birth of a child. More of this human connection, right? They talked about workplace recognition, not just focusing on the output, but really being more human-centric, drawing attention to these special events, being more thoughtful. It's not having a recognition program at work. It's leaders and managers making this more human connection. Going to Sigmund's example, his son's manager possibly acknowledging that a new version of his favorite game is coming out this weekend and saying to his son, hey, you want to leave a little early on Friday? Because I know it's coming out and this is important to you. Making that human connection, not just a rewards program.
I want to add something there, Holly, as well, that fits, is that Massimo, I'm giving away a secret here, I guess, but Massimo Med Devices is not known as one of the best places to work for the executive team. It's a little harsh on the edges, but that my son doesn't work for the CEO, he works for the CTO. And that man has made everything below him calm and nice and a great place to work for my son. So it doesn't have to be the culture of the entire company. Every manager controls from them down.
And so the last slide kind of summarizes our thoughts on recognition and the 4 steps for giving recognition I just touched on. Make it fulfilling. The studies show when you give recognition a few times every week, that it really drives engagement. So important for our Zoomers. Authentic. We talked about making it very personal. Embedded in the culture. again, how important the culture of an organization is as millennials start leading Zoomers, millennials being in the C-suite. Embed this in the culture, adjust your culture. And as I said, make it personal. Everyone is unique. Ask them, you know, what drives your engagement? How can we recognize you? Not everyone is the same. So those are our concluding thoughts. You know, we did a lot of musing over this and wondered, what does this all mean for leaders and for organizations? There's many other factors driving this. We know that. There's many other things that leaders can be doing, but we thought these would be several things to think about, mindset, and 4 ways to get started.
So Holly,
Thank you so much.
we have a question from Scott. In a competitive work environment, if you don't step up to go that extra mile, then it opens the door for someone else with a different mindset and a similar skill set to put you at risk.
We're also seeing, that's a great question, Scott. We're also seeing the trend with the Zoomers that, you know, we as boomers had loyalty to our companies. We worked in our companies 20+ years. A good friend of mine just had her 30-year anniversary at her company. The Zoomers aren't going to be in that way. They are not that they're not loyal to their companies, and not that they're not going to be competitive and do their best work, as Sigmund said, but they'll be with a company 2 or 3 years and then move on to another company because they like the adventure, or, you know, maybe it's more appropriate for their emerging work-life balance, whatever that might be. So, and as Sig said, this isn't going to be 100% of your workforce. There will be those that will stay, like his son, and are competitive and will thrive in that environment. But again, I think it's recognizing the change in our workforce and helping leaders adjust the mindset.
Yeah, I agree that it is you are in competition with other workers, but to be honest, at least for the next year or so, we are in a situation where, you know, there aren't a lot of people. There are more people than there are more jobs than there are people. So you have some solidity in your place. If you're doing your work, again, this is not about slacking off, but it's about having not burning out, about having your own. Well, that's what I said in the thing. Whether or not you want to be a quiet quitter, that's up to you. That's your own choices on your own environment. But to be able to manage people who are like this, people who do not get their identity from the job, that's the challenge for us, is to work with those people in a successful way and to make them a part of the environment.
I get that. I'm sorry for breaking in there. Hopefully it's okay. I was when I was at the corporate side. Yeah, I did the long hours, and quite honestly, after leaving there, I was burned out on it. I did solicit the assistance that I needed, but it didn't happen for whatever reason. And so, yeah, I mean, I get all that. It feels like there might be a different phrase that might be more appropriate. I understand we're addressing this phrase. If you were going to rephrase this, how would you rephrase it?
Well, one of the things that we really came to realize is what we've been talking about today really isn't new. And the ideas that we've shared today can be positive for all workers, not just quiet quitters. The things that we've shared today really drive engagement in all organizations, you know, building trust, having alignment with culture, recognition, you know, how do all of this benefits all of your teams and all of your talent.
From my point of view, let me turn that around for a moment. I get your question. I'm not sure I have a good answer, but from the Zoomer point of view, the definition of quiet quitting is not accepting abuse. because that's what they would call this. The expectation that you were here, you did your job, but I don't want to hire somebody. I need this other job done. Can you do that too? That would be considered normal, 15 years ago, and it's not considered normal now. So, unfortunately, the work your way or the act your wage or do your job is sort of what I would call it. But that doesn't have the punch of everything else. But that's really what it's coming down to. We have someone with their hand raised. Cindy, I don't know how you want to handle that.
Khan, go ahead and ask your question. And then after that, Sigmund and Holly, why don't you share with people how they can get in touch with you and how you work.
We'll do
with
that next.
companies.
Okay.
Khan.
Well, thank you very much. I just would like to make a comment, and then perhaps Sigmund and Holly can comment. So my comment kind of more like a question. So from my perspective, I used to report directly to the CEO, and I have the impression that the board, who most of them are much older, and they tend to value like the hard technical skills. But I think what we've been talking about is like really soft skills that leaders should have. And I don't think I think most of the people that have encountered don't have that sort of skill set. And I think we are really at like almost like a work culture shift that it's kind of like twilight, it's kind of, we caught, at least for me, like I feel like get caught in the middle. Like I'm not too old, where I feel like kind of like a Gen Z sort of thing, where I value, work-life balance. And the other one, the other thing I want to say is that I think for our leader who exhibit this sort of like human connection or try to do engagement, I think they're typically perceived as a weak leader, because when I lead the pharmacy department, I do all that. I talk to my staff and say, what's important to you? Let me know how I can help you perform better. But it seems to me like my boss, the CEOs, think that I'm just a weak leader, that I am trying to give in to what their demands are. So that's just my thought. So if you have anything to add on.
I think you really touched on one of the key challenges to do some of the things that Sigmund and I talked about today to help leaders. We do need to invest in leaders. We need to help leaders through training and coaching, develop this new mindset. It needs to be a conversation in organizations, and not just be quiet about the challenges our companies are going to be facing. So you're absolutely correct. Companies need to be having these conversations, putting strategies in place around these ideas, investing in training their leaders and investing in training their managers to work with talent.
So I am a boomer, so my examples, may be a little antagonistic, but I will say my reaction to that is I present a different face. I had a boss who didn't believe in the new way of in DevOps, which is important to us techies. It's the way we're supposed to do things now. He hated the idea, so I gave it a different name, and he liked it. So I told my team, we're doing DevOps, but outside of us, we call it release engineering, because the boss is willing for us to do release engineering, but not willing for us to do DevOps. And so, basically what I'm saying is that I treated my team in the way that you say, and then I turned around and told my boss, man, I'm driving him into the ground. You kidding? I got a whip. So, that's my boomer reaction. I don't know that probably not as politically correct, but it worked for me. But I do strongly believe, just quickly, in defining the company from me down. Go ahead.
So, just one other thought, one thing that comes to mind with this is that connection and engagement with each other and with our teams has really evolved. And that's really what we're talking about, is this, it's no longer like the ivory tower and the minions, right?
Right.
It is more about an integrated management style and having, it could be the CEO, but the CEO engages with people as a colleague, not as a superior. And I think that, you know, we have to, as leaders, just engage with people. Someone told me that I reported to, because you know, when I was with Toshiba, the senior leadership, you know, it just seemed like they were so different. And he said, Christy, running naked through the forest, we're all the same. So that's, and I think about that. And, you know, it's like we are, whether it's the receptionist or the CEO, if we just treat each other as though we're all the same.
What's going on here?
Hey, I have a comment.
But hold
we have
on,
a hand raised
before
too.
we have any more questions, what I want Holly and Sigmund to do is to share how they work with companies and how to get in hold of them.
Go, Holly.
Did you want to pull the slide back up?
Yeah, go ahead. I just took it down
Yeah, no problem. So
because
we'll
people
bring it up
wanted
in
to
just,
see each other.
I gotta find it. There it is. Too many windows open on my screen. There we go.
So this will be in the deck that we'll leave with you. My career has been in organizational development as a practitioner, and now with my company, really helping small to medium-sized companies look at their culture, align their culture with their strategy, and ensure that they've got the right talent in the right roles. That might be a change management strategy. It might be some succession management or planning. Doing quite a bit of work right now around helping leaders really grow and address some of these issues that we're talking about. Also working with teams on team engagement and productivity, given our hybrid workforces and our remote workforces. So I love introductions to small and medium-sized companies, maybe companies that are going through a merger or an acquisition where they would like some help with strategy and culture and looking at their talent. As I mentioned, I'm working a lot with engagement and helping companies transform to our new challenges that we've been talking about today. So I'm also a former boot camper, and I am here to help anyone that I can to pay it forward. Here's my contact information. Please reach out to me if there's anything that I can do to assist any of you today.
Okay.
Okay.
And, yeah, go ahead, Sigmund.
Okay, so I am a semi-retired CTO. So right now what I'm doing is serving on boards. I'm interested in any small companies, you know, that need technology advice or aid in that direction. I worked for the internet for 5 years and changed the way part of it operated, and then that wore me out. So now I'm actually working serving on boards. So that's what I'm doing, having a good time, and be glad to help anybody else out in any way that I can. Thank you.
Okay, we'll send this deck out to everyone, right?
Cool. Yes,
Okay.
you have it. You have a copy, so we're good.
Okay, so let's start with Dan. Dan, you have a question.
Well, I got a statement and then there's a question. So when I was at HID Global, they held a 3-day culture of performance class for their people that they thought would be managers and directors, etc. And it was put on by 2 PhD psychologists. And, you know, they were really introducing us in 2009 to emotional intelligence. And then they had a second class in 2013 that was again 3 days. And it was phenomenal. But as I sit here today and listen to what Sigmund and Holly have presented, that class needs to be revised. But here's my question. I work for a company where the 2 co-founders are both 45 years old. And one of the co-founders I work for, last week, he sent me a Zoom or a video where he was giving me comments where he felt I didn't follow through and wasn't detailed enough. And it was about my commission. And I'm thinking to myself, you got to talk to me when you're talking about money. You can't send me a video, because you're so busy. And I just wanted Holly and Sigmund's thoughts on that.
Well, I'm a boomer. I would be a little taken aback by that myself. But
Well, I'm a boomer too.
I think you just gave us a good reality of, our emerging workplace and just how people are going to be interacting. I mean, for me, he should have picked up the phone and had a conversation with you, or if he's remote, at least have a Zoom meeting and have a conversation with you. So this is an opportunity for you then to do what in the style that is best for you. So you can pick up the phone and have a call with him, or schedule a Zoom call with him and have the conversation and make it interactive. Even though he chose not to do that. That would be one reaction I'd have.
Yeah,
Thanks.
one thing to think of, the younger generation, as a technologist, let me define it this way. That device you have in your pocket that you call a phone isn't a phone. It's a computer that happens to have a phone app. It also has a texting app. It also has a TikTok app. It also, et cetera, et cetera. So, to the young people, using that device as a phone is just one of its many options that I may or may not ever use. And so, it's just, yeah, I'm a boomer too.
Reality.
I fully agree, Sigmund. I work for a marketing company that only focuses on the security industry. And we talk about that phone and all the apps on it and, all the things it can do. But one other thing, and a good friend of mine who had a very successful consulting business in LA, I shared with him the story that one of the co-founders uses a lot of profanity in team meetings, and 50% of the employees are women.
Yeah.
And I called two of the women and I asked them if his profanity bothered them, and they both said no. And they were late 20s, early 30s. Well, they called him and told him I asked that question.
Oh.
And he got on a Zoom call with me and he was so upset. Don't tell me how to run my company. Don't do this, don't do that. And if you ever do go behind my back again, you're fired. And I was like, Alex, I just wanted to let you know that your choice in language is not very professional, but maybe in today's world, it is. I don't know. I don't know how to measure that.
Just quickly, Daniel, there's something else in what you're saying, and that is that information is everywhere now. It used to be it was harder to contact people, but the expectation that anything I say to anybody gets passed around. The notices in company about don't talk about your wages with each other. Well, yeah, good luck with that. So, I mean, at some level, he needs to realize in today's world, everything he says is everywhere.
Okay, let's get Anne Marie's question.
Thank you.
Yeah, not really as much of a question. I comment. First, I say, Holly and Sigmund, this was excellent. It really wasn't about quiet quitting. I think what you've teased out, and you maybe have another session that you could bring to us if you work together again, is really this is around generational mindset. And, most people on this call are either Boomer or Gen X. But interesting things in terms of what you said. I mean, our mindset has always been about, the work first. It's always in our brain, and it's really hard to get that DNA out if you worked in your career for 20, 30 years. And this is really a people first mindset. And even things like we, comment on here was soft skills. That it's not soft skills, it's core skills. And what I mean is we think of it as soft skills. They think of it as core skills. What we would say is when someone decides to give us a phone call, we would think, okay, that they should have called us, where they're thinking like, why did you waste my time calling me? You should have texted me. And I think for us, as we are, even as job seekers and stuff, the biggest thing of this is like our framing of how we even think about work. And in fact, even the way you presented the slides was to this audience. I would almost love to see how this topic would be discussed if we weren't this audience, if we were the other, and almost a reverse framing. I would love it if. So I just thought you guys have tapped into something really interesting and unique for us to reframe how we approach it. It's really hard because it's built into our DNA so much, right? And even the things I find interesting, like when I sit and I go into webinars and stuff, the chats are flying. And I, as my boomer lens, am looking at this or boomer really, looking at that and saying like, man, they're just like making comments about crap, but it's because they want to be acknowledged and recognized. And it's a way of saying I'm here. And I'm in my lens going, that's not worth the time. But the opposite of that really is. And so this aspect of when you talk to somebody and our first instinct says, well, okay, how's things going? Like how is who you are, even how we described ourselves in your bios, we're like all the litany of stuff we've done. And it just is it permeates us so much, right? I think you've got something to do another session on. So
well said, Anne Marie.
Yeah, thank you, Anne Marie. I think it's great. Okay, we've got to wrap up.
Cool.
We're going to send the deck out. We'll send the recording out, and then we're cooking up another great topic for you next week. And that is all about how to leverage the bootcamp community. How do you engage with boot campers? How can you meet other people? How can you search for them? We've got a ton of people in our bootcamp LinkedIn group. And how can we, get boot campers to connect with other people? So that's what we're going to do. And thank you all for joining us. And Sigmund and Holly, absolutely great topic. And it was presented really well. And, that term quiet quitting, I think is, we need to come up with a better term for that. But I agree, it's something that we all need to be aware of. And thank you so much for educating us and for enlightening us and bringing it to the forefront of our community. And I do agree with Anne Marie that, doing it based or through the lens of, the younger generation could be really fun.
We'll have to
So
release a
thank you
TikTok.
all. We'd love to have you back. And thank you all. Enjoy the weekend. Hope to see you next week. And don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you need to.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.